Hello and welcome to Life Sciences Knowledge Hub. I'm David McClelland and I'm joined now by Alex Hamilton of Syncona. Alex, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Just tell us a little bit about your work and that of Syncona, please.
Well, good morning, David. Thank you for having me on. So I'm a partner at Syncona. I've been here for the last 4 years. Syncona is a venture capital company founded by the Wellcome Trust in 2012. We're now listed on the London Stock Exchange. We have about £1.5 billion in assets under management. Of that, somewhere between £500 and £600 probably today is held in cash. The rest is invested in our portfolio, which is relatively limited. We have about 11 companies in our portfolio that we back quite heavily. We are an evergreen long-term investor, and so we're not constrained by typical fund timelines. That was a very deliberate setup by the Wellcome Trust about 10 years ago.
Okay, so you mentioned 11 or so in your stable. Give us some examples of successful companies that you've supported financially or founded, and what the common traits, what the key success factors were, perhaps.
Sure. So I'll take two that are sort of superficially quite different, but I'll try to draw out the similarities between them. So I guess the one I want to start with is called Blue Earth Diagnostics. We founded this company in 2014 as a spin out from GE Healthcare, and it really proved the Syncona investment model. So we spun it out with a £25 million Series A back in 2014. Back in 2014, that was a large Series A. I think the landscape has changed quite substantially since then. We built the company, we took it through US and EU marketing authorizations, and we actually held that company until it was profitable before selling it to a strategic acquirer in 2019. That sale returned about 10 times the invested capital. So it's a good case study of sort of how we think about investing, taking it all the way through the key milestones in terms of developing a drug. So we founded this company to develop and commercialize molecular imaging agents in areas of high unmet need. The lead asset was a compound called fluciclovine. That's now branded as Aximin. It's a PET imaging agent, positron emission tomography. So it's like an MRI scan or whatever. This agent accumulates and rapidly metabolizes in cells. And Blue Earth developed it for recurrent prostate cancer and subsequently for glioma. So what we saw there really was a significant unmet medical need in the market. That's what we always look for in our investments. What we saw was that there are, if you're diagnosed with prostate cancer, your first line therapy is usually surgical resection, prostatectomy. After that, the clinician can monitor whether or not the tumor is recurring through a bloodstream biomarker called PSA, prostate serum antigen, which is expressed by the tumor cells. The problem with that approach is if you start to see those levels tick up, you know that the tumor is coming back, but you don't know where it is because you're sampling the blood compartment. And that's about the only part of the body that you know the tumor is not in. So it might be in the bone marrow, it might be in the lymph nodes, or it might be a local recurrence of the tumor. And the way that you treat all of those things is different. You might need to do surgery, you might need to apply chemotherapy, you might need to give radiotherapy, but you don't really know unless you know where the tumor is. So prior to Aximin, basically clinicians had two options, and they were both very bad options. Either they could guess where the tumor was, or they could just leave it and wait for it to grow bigger so they could see it on a scan at a later date. Neither of those is a very good outcome for a patient. So Aximin accumulates in the tumor. You can see it light up, whether it's in the prostate bed or in the lymph nodes or in the bone marrow. And then the clinician can decide how they want to treat the patient subsequently. So Aximin received accelerated approval on the basis that it specifically accumulated in the prostate tumor. That was converted to a full marketing authorization in, I think, 2017, possibly 2018, on the basis that we had a successful pivotal trial demonstrating that outcome actually led to a change in management of the patient. So it wasn't, it moved from the sort of biomarker approval into a change in outcomes for these patients, and that hopefully they're being treated in a better way. So in fact, that clinical trial showed, I think, a 61% change in management, which is a pretty dramatic difference.
Mm.
And so that's the kind of transformational impact that we seek to have on disease. So essentially what we saw an opportunity to found and build and fund this business, which we did. We built out the management team, and we developed the strategy that enabled accelerated approval for Axamin, and then funded the company through its pivotal trial. We also helped them get insurance coverage across the United States. We supported the in-licensing of a pipeline asset. We funded them also through the generation of positive phase 3 data in glioma. So we expanded the commercial opportunity as well. So that was sort of an instance where, as a venture capital company, we were able to take this business all the way through from, you know, a little bit of clinical data that sort of got it off the ground to, you know, a pharmaceutical company selling a drug, or in this case, technically a diagnostic. But in the last full year for which we held the company, they had revenues of £84 million, and they had EBITDA of £29 million. And we sold that company for over $450 million in June 2019, and we delivered a 10x return on invested capital.
A real success. Yeah. A real success for patients ultimately, but also for your investors as well there. Are there any particular areas in the biotech sector which you think right now are the most attractive to be investing in, and why do you think so?
So we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have a portfolio of 11 companies today. Of those, 9 are in cell and gene therapies. So we think cell and gene therapy is still a very active area of interest. Despite the fact there's so much activity in the space, when you look at the approvals, there's still, I think, only 4 or 5 T-cell therapies approved. There's only 2 AAV gene therapies approved, and they're both in monogenic disorders. So we see significant scope for expansion in both those modalities. We also think that you know, that there remain significant clinical unmet needs in rare diseases and oncology. I think that those modalities that I've mentioned are well placed to address those sorts of diseases, but I think that they're not the only way of going about it. So I think that you'll continue to see interest in the small molecule and antibody space, and other biologics, protein replacement therapies, and so forth. I think fundamentally we're just in an era of so much enhanced biological understanding and superior tools that the rate of innovation, I think, is very high at the moment in terms of identifying new scientific hypotheses to test, and we seem to have the modalities to test some of them clinically now.
What advice would you give to entrepreneurs in the life sciences area that are looking to develop their ideas and technology into fully commercial operations? What would your advice be for them to be able to secure support, secure investment from investors like Syncona?
So I would encourage entrepreneurs to think about investors, certainly at the early stage, very much as partners in the business. So people who get involved strategically and operationally to build it out. You know, I like to think that there's a lot of expertise, particularly within Syncona, but also within the broader VC community, with regards to building businesses and financing strategy. And I think that if there's sort of an open approach from the entrepreneur to the investor, saying, I'm willing to listen to your feedback and understand how you would like to build the company in addition to how I'm thinking about it, and then try and pull out the best outcomes from that. I think where entrepreneurs are prone to tripping up is when they see investors as purely financial suppliers, essentially. I think that there's a lot to be gained from working closely with your investment team.
Yes, it's the collaboration, the partnership, rather than just the cash there. Before we wrap up, Alex, just tell me how you see the investment landscape across life sciences generally. How do you see that developing over the next few years? What do you think will be the main areas of opportunity?
I think that the main areas are really going to continue to be major unmet clinical needs. I think that we're starting to see some interesting things in diseases such as Alzheimer's, in AMD, for example. I think there's going to be significant advances on patient stratification through genetics. I think there's going to be continued advances in monogenic disorders. I think that also we've had a wave of technology investment in the last few years. It does look like cost of capital is increasing at the moment, and you might see a bit more investment shift towards companies that are generating more near-term clinical data compared to where we have been in the last couple of years.
Really interesting insights. Listen, Alex Hamilton from Syncona, thank you very much indeed for joining us here today.
Thank you.